We'd like to welcome you on to our workshop, and this is a few more people than I think we anticipated. We said we had 24 signed up, and it looks like a few more than that. This workshop will give you the definitive answer on whether or not the search was worth it. That's what we were told we had to do. So Karen and I take our charges very seriously. I'm Alan Steed, and I'm a therapist in Minneapolis. I am a member of the Adoption Triad. I'm an adopted person, and I went through a search and reunion about 10 years ago. And through the course of my presentation today, you'll hear bits and pieces of that. And if you have questions for me personally, I'll either answer them or I'll tell you that's too personal, I can't do it, but feel free to ask. This is Karen Phillips.
Hi.
And I'll let you introduce yourself.
All right. I've just a week ago graduated with an undergraduate degree in social work from Boston University. Thank goodness it's over. And I've been involved in the adoption reform movement. I think is that what we're calling it now? Since 1984, when I was reunited happily with my entire natural family, because my parents were married after I was placed for adoption. And so when I found them, I found everyone. And we've just been involved ever since. And I've had 6 years to think about whether or not the search was worth it. And I'll be happy to share all of that with you. And I hope that you all will share with us so that we can come to some conclusion and present that conclusion. So.
We're going to take a vote at the end, and it'll be published, next year, and we'll present the results at the Los Angeles conference. We'd like to get to know a little bit about you and find out about who's represented here, and maybe we could just start by asking how many adoptees are here. Okay. Would you leave your hands up, and let me ask how many of you have searched? Okay, just a couple. How many of you have found? So how many of you know the answer to this question already? Why are you here? That was easy. Thank you. So good number of adoptees. How many biological parents are there here? Birth parents. How many of you have searched? And how many of you have found? Okay. All right. Thank you. How about adoptive parents? Okay. And how many of you have, two of you, let's not pick on you here, how many of you have searched and found?
Yep.
Okay, great.
They've already been picked.
Pardon?
They've already been picked.
Yeah, I know. Now, there is a group of people here who we haven't talked about yet. How many honorary adoptees or honorary triad members or
Significant
professionals?
others.
Significant
Or
others.
significant others.
Searched and found.
Okay, thank you. Good. Karen and I talked, this workshop was really extensively planned, and we had at least a half an hour on the phone, and then we met about 2 hours ago. I had a really interesting, I've almost forgotten what it was like to do the search. It's been 10 years for me, for both parents. But I was realizing that today I was walking around the lobby looking for a person that I knew absolutely nothing about. I didn't know what she looked like. And I thought, boy, this feels like before I'd done my search. I remember going from town to town and wondering if my birth mother or birth father lived here. And I would look at people's faces, and I would try and see if someone looked like me. And I found myself doing that again today, looking for Karen. And wanted to share that with you, but finally found her. So, successful reunion here. We thought we'd perhaps start by asking you to do a little bit of work and talk with us. That's why the microphone is set up like this, so that we can all be on the tape, and you can all buy tapes and hear yourself at the conference in Chicago. But I think all of us harbor some fears about searching. I'd like to ask you, perhaps while we talk about some of the fears that we had going into our search, I'd like to ask you to think about what some of your fears were, and maybe share with us how you dealt with those, how you coped with it, what some of the fears were. And I think for me, I get caught up in a whirlwind. Initially, I applied for a visa to go out of the country and travel. And I was at the point in my life where I wanted to disturb the universe a little bit. It's a stage that Erickson has where people go through a phase during adolescence of wanting to disturb things and stir things up and make their mark in the world. I hadn't done that. And so I really decided that I really wanted to disturb the universe a bit. So I wrote the adoption agency from which I was adopted, and I said, I'd like my original birth certificate, knowing that they couldn't give it to me. They wrote me back and gave me my non-identifying information, and it was information that I had not known that I could even get. I had talked to my adoptive parents, and they had given me what little information was available, and I thought that was the end of it. And I got back the non-identifying information, and I found out where I thought I was English and German, I was Norwegian and Swiss, and I haven't lived that one down yet, but all sorts of things, physical descriptions, and things that were very important to me. And I remember walking around for weeks, it seemed, with a new identity and this new information about myself. It was extremely powerful. They asked if they could provide any more help. Well, this is 10 years ago. They asked if they could give me any more help in locating my birth parents. They'd be willing to do that. And I said, fine, go ahead, thinking that they would have great difficulty and probably no luck. The best I can figure out is they made one phone call to the last known address for my mother, and my birth grandmother, still lived at that address and at that phone number. She then gave them permission. She gave permission for them to give me her phone number, and I called her. She then called my mother, and my mother called me. So there's lots of triangles here, you'll notice. All this happened within, my memory is foggy, but I've been saying a month between the time I asked for my original birth certificate and the time that I met my mother. Okay? So I got caught up in this whirlwind, and I think part of my issue is I wasn't aware of the fears. I was so totally numb at that point that I was just kind of going ahead. I'd made a choice to do this, and I wasn't going to stop. But at this point, I didn't have fears. I think I was too naive. I was too excited. But I think fears are pretty normal. And the fears that I really got into were much more related to, was she going to like me when she got off the plane and met me? And how was I going to recognize her? And I tapped into some of that with Karen. Would I be rejected again? Was I looking for a mother substitute? I questioned my own motivation of why I was doing this. I was 31. That's another issue which I'll come to a little bit later. So, in terms of fears, Karen, did you have some fears?
Yes, I did, and I remember I had one tremendous fear. Well, first of all, I was 21 when I searched. That was 6 years ago. And it was a very quick search because my mother had left a letter at the agency. And luckily, someone at the agency saved the letter, put the letter in the file. No one took it out at any time and destroyed it. And the social worker who handled my case when I went back to the agency thought it would be a good idea to share that letter with me. So I was lucky on all of those counts. I know that from hearing other stories from other people, I know that all that doesn't happen sometimes. Anyway, the letter said that my parents were married and that they would want to see me if I wanted to see them. That was August of 1984. Now, from August of 1984 through the first week of October of that same year, so that's what, maybe a month and a half or 2 months, okay. Through that time, we had my mother and I and my father and I, my birth parents, whatever they are. From now on, when I say mother and father, that's what I'm talking about. We had many, many conversations. We lived several states away, and so the phone bills were unbelievable. We sometimes talked all night. We had many, many telephone conversations. We exchanged letters. We exchanged photos. I'm saying all this so that you'll know that the fear I had was not based on reality. When it was time to meet, we set a date and a place, I believed that one possible outcome would be that I would walk into the room and they would shoot me. This is after knowing them, after hearing their voices on the telephone, after sharing everything. You know, we had 8-hour phone calls. After all of that, I thought that one possibility, now that wasn't the only possibility.
Literally?
Literally. Like my father, because they're married, my father would be there and, you know, would have the gun pointing at me. And the point to all this is that I did it anyway, and I'm so proud of myself for that. I mean, I've thought about this a lot. I thought that, and I walked into that room in spite of that fear. The only other possibility, I thought, okay, there are only two things that can happen now with this, you know, reunion. They'll shoot me, or they'll hug me, and you know what? That isn't what happened. They didn't hug me, and they didn't shoot me. My mother had the door open, and I walked in, and I had my arms full of photo albums. What else, you know? And she grabbed me by my shoulders and like pulled me into the room and placed me like in a chair, and you know, that's what happened. So, you know, my fear did not come true. I'm here to say that. And I guess, you know, I thought, well, why would I think they would shoot me? I mean, for God's sake, you know, they wrote to me, they wanted to meet me, they got the letter at the agency, you know, all of this, why? So they could shoot me? I think because, you know, it was 21 years that they didn't come to find me. You know, even though there was a letter at the agency, I still had to go to the agency and seek them. That they wouldn't want other people to know that they want to, you know, well, you know, let's just end this right now, you know, kind of thing. And so, anyway, that was a big fear, and I thought that was a real possibility. So I'm really interested in some of the fears that you all had. I see. Oh, okay. Anyway, that was a fear that I had.
Would anybody be willing to share any of the fears that we had, perhaps, or just maybe have?
Well, I didn't have a very nice reunion. So I lived, before my search, or during my search, even when I had my non-identified information, I had quite a bit of information on my papers. So for me, these were the people. This was my mom, the piece of paper, so I could show it to all of my friends, teenagers. And this is me, you know. This is my family. They weren't real, like weren't people. So anyway, I searched for about a year in the archives, and it wasn't on, you know, it was a matter of name. I had the names and everything. And I had a friend of the movement helping me out, and she made the first contacts, you know. And all this time I thought, you know, when I was a little girl, well, I thought, you know, there would be king and queen. And as I grew up, because I was thinking constantly about that a lot. As I grew up, I was the people around me from the movement made me realize, I think they created fears in me, and I think the fears help, because then you're not on cloud nine or in the bubble world, you know, in fantasy land. Well, it'll be hugs and kisses, it'll be like my fantasy, it'll be rich, it'll be this and that, you know. So for me, the fears that this person helped me have helped me kind of like construct some, I don't know if I can call them fears, but I guess the nice, beautiful, and then the contrast of the reality, what I could meet. So anyways, she really pushed that on me. And when I met them, it was very poverty, you know, it was the total opposite than what I had dreamed about. And that really helped me to have those fears, you know, because when I met my birth mother, she didn't let me in, you know, it was a very poor environment, it was a bug. And she was very ashamed of her situation. And, you know, I felt like, oh my God, you know, I gotta give her money, you know. I was just, you know, so, and my birth father never met, you know, we had called each other on the phone. I mean, I called him, and he said, yeah, I'll be there, but he never was there. So if I wouldn't have had those talks, you know, with other people and hearing other searches, and I think reality would have really hit me in the face, like, too hard. And it would have been more painful than if I would not have fear, and I would came out like be still in this fantasy and bangs. It would have been like a slap in the face.
I was, the fears I had to do it. I mean, I had fears, but nothing was going to stop me. And, but I kept hearing this endless rhetoric from my adoptive family, who I really kept in very close touch with about what I was doing and the discoveries I would make, and my own husband, who would say things to me like, if my mother gave me away, I would hate her. I would never want to find her. My adoptive sister said, aren't you afraid of destroying someone's life? What if you find, I found I had a full-blooded sister who I never knew about. Aren't you afraid? She might not know she's even adopted. What right do you have to go in and muck up someone's life like that? And there you have your own concerns, but now you're going to be responsible for destroying lives, you know? And I just thought that that was really interesting. That is a very prevalent view by people outside. I have come to now appreciate those are their defenses. What my search means to them is the people who want their piece of my love and how they worry about what that means. I can now reframe it in a positive way, that that's their love for me. They're afraid, is there enough love to go around? But that was the worst obstacle, was my lack of support from the people who I needed the most to be there for me at this very vulnerable time.
So there's a fear of loss of support for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Rejection of searching.
And that whole thing about the good adoptee, the bad adoptee, the good adoptee would never do this. So I found myself as a grown woman thinking, man, you're really doing something really bad to mom and dad. But it was like, I don't care. You know, I'm really breaking out of that good adoptee who always does the right thing. And that was very freeing to say, yeah, well, I guess I might ruin someone's life. I don't think that will happen. Everything I found out so far didn't ruin mine. In fact, it enhanced it. And that's what I would tell people.
I think there's a process. Go ahead.
I wanted to bring up a point. I was not really thinking of rejection or abandonment. Older, and I wasn't adopted until I was 3 years old, and I was in a couple foster homes. And I think it would have been better for me if I really would have dealt with that. I was born in Canada, but I did find my mother. It was a difficult search, and she don't have anything to do with me. She won't even talk to me. And it has really affected my life. It's just, well, I've gone totally into shock regarding it. So I think maybe if I had been more focused on maybe the rejection or some of the fear, I might have dealt better with this.
When did you find her?
About a week ago.
Just a week.
And she won't talk to me at all. When I called her the first time, she just said, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in a home. And it's a real difficult search for those born in Canada. She was real hard to find. I did find some other family, but they never knew about me. They know very little about her. She didn't seem to have communication with anybody. And I thought, no, you're not going to let me know about this. So I called her back again, and I told her how much she meant to me. And she said, all I did was give birth to you. I don't want to talk to you again. So I'm saying that if I would have been maybe, I mean, it was in the back of my mind, but I just never believed
I
it.
know, but it's so hard to prepare anyway. I'd like to share something with you because it's just been a week. And it sounds to me, I mean, timing has so much to do with all this, and I would love to hear, I'm sure some people are nodding here. Everyone's on, going at their own pace, and I will just tell you that even, my parents, when I met them, and they sent the letter, and we agreed, and we had phone calls, and we met, and all of that. And now, many of you probably know my mother, Linda Brown. She has a book. She's very active in the movement. Well, this is 6 years into the reunion. But 6 years ago, when I first met them, I was, hey, I'm here, I'm back, this is it, we're set, my brothers, that's great. I was like that, ready to go. Everyone, my aunts, my grandmother, and my parents were still saying, well, what do you mean? You mean you didn't have the white picket fence? What do you mean being adopted is different? We've known children who were adopted over the years, blah, blah, blah. So even people who are now very enlightened and very involved were 6 years ago still in the beginning stages and just learning and just coming out of all of those years of not ever talking about it. So just the differences in timing.
Well, and then I have an adopted brother who's adopted here in Asia. He's upset with me because I'm doing this, and why did I open up this Pandora's box? I'm looking for my identity. This is nothing to do with my adopted parents, and other people that are not in the movement really do not get it. They're like, oh, you have these wonderful adopted parents. What is the point? It's my life. I have the right to look for it. But unless people are in a moment, there's just not a word to describe how you feel and how important it is to you. No matter if the search is negative, it's still true.
And I think
Yes.
even being in the movement, the words and to describe how we feel and finding people are not always there. The most frustrating question people can ask me is, you found your birth parents, what did that feel like? And I don't have the words to describe it. It's impossible for me to state with the same feeling tone how that felt and how important and significant that was. I'd also like just to say that, and I would guess that there are other people in the room, maybe if you would just nod if this has happened to you, but my first correspondence with my father, the first words my mother said to me were, this is off the plane in Minneapolis, she said, you look like your father. And I thought, okay, that means I'm going to find him. When I first found him, I sent him a picture because I wanted to make sure that he knew that I looked like him. His first letter back to me was, what if I don't want to be found? And I felt I'm disturbing his life. And that had been a fear for me because I knew that he had remarried, I knew he probably had another family, that I had to have siblings, and I had real debate at that point. I didn't have that as much with my mother, but with my father, it was more real. I was more aware of some of the issues. And his first letter back was, what if I don't want to be found? And he sent me a picture. And I was sort of ready for that. And I had done it, I had found him, I felt stronger, I felt like I'd at least, if I wanted to, I could drive down and find out where he lived, I could see where he was. I pinpointed him, and I didn't need everything else. So I didn't write him back. And I was ready to work my 12-step program and just let go for a while. And it was either 3 or 4 months later that, without my writing, he wrote a second letter saying, I'd like to have some contact with you. And I think it's a matter, a few heads here, any heads? No experience going the same way? Okay. He needed some time to adjust to the fact. He didn't know if I was born. He didn't know that if I was male, female, if I'd lived or died. And so this was a pretty big shock for him. He had another family. He had essentially another life. And I was intruding on that. And it took him some time to adjust. And my hope for you is that that's the same with your mother. But she may be in that first phase of grieving, which is shock and denial.
You know,
She has all the clues to my life. There's no other family, and there's not much information on my father, so it felt like a door being closed, but I still, the truth is better than not knowing.
I agree.
there's no way that a human being can be prepared for this stuff. Before I started my search, I read every book I could get my hands on, and I said, yeah, I'm going to be prepared for everything. And my biggest fear was they'd be dead. But I was going to be prepared for rejection, I was going to be prepared for the hang up on the phone, I was going to be prepared for elated wonderfulness. And I didn't get anything, I got something in between there. But it's kind of like death, too, in that no matter how much you prepare for it, and no matter how many things you get in your brain about you, what you're willing to live with on it, whatever the reaction is, if it's not exactly what you want and what you'd really, in your greatest fantasy, wanted, is not going to be as easy to take as you think it might be. And so the process of going back and having to then reevaluate the expectations which we thought we dumped in going into this still exist. And then we have to deal with those expectations and understand what parts of it we didn't. I talk to people in this conference, and my birth mother has kind of backed away after having initially a very strong relationship. And people who are kind of going in and out of this, and there's no, just like we're all here, there's no answer for this stuff. And there's no answer for that other than people are saying, give them time, hang in there and don't give up. And that's sort of the theme that I've heard. And so I just pass that on because people are real supportive of that.
I wanted to say too, sometimes, and I want to word this really carefully, but I sometimes think maybe the initial reaction of being kind of bad is almost sometimes better. Like in my case, my initial reaction, my birth mother's initial reaction was wonderful. I mean, it was way up. And I don't think she had a lot of time to deal with everything. I had searched for her for 2 years and also felt I was really prepared for the worst. And it turned out to be the best. And then everything kind of dug up for her, and she cut me off cold. So sometimes I almost think maybe if it starts off bad, there's almost like a chance that, given some time, they're gonna come around, you know? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Just kind of gives them a chance to,
First here and then,
The topic of this is, was the search worth it? And I would say yes. To me it was, no matter what you find, because at least you can deal with, you know, some of the fantasy you live with all your life. But I was told in the beginning, at the age of 10, my mother was dead and my father was dead, and that was it. So I kind of accepted it at that age. But then when I started looking, when I reached 40, I saw that's not true. Everybody says that. But in my case, it was true. And when I finally did get the information on my mother, I, heard she was dead, and I said, well, my father must be alive. I'll try to find him. And I was just reunited with his family at this conference, the day before. But last year I found out he had died at a young age too, in an accident. So I'm kind of trying to restructure everything and work in all the things after, because I feel the search, once you complete your search, that's not still the end of it. Because you have to work in all these things, because I was also given false information from the adoption agency. They lied to my parents about different things too. So I'm finding, even though I say it's definitely worth it, no matter what, it's worth it, it's still kind of trying to absorb and make sense of all the lies and dealing with people who aren't alive. And no brothers and sisters either.
I think the search and reunion is just the start of a larger picture.
I think so. I think it's something that goes on.
There are post-search issues that affect every aspect of the triad, relationships on both ends, with biological parents and adoptive parents and siblings, friends. It's just, the ramifications are extremely powerful, far-reaching. Yes.
I just want to say, we were just talking about this woman over here, and she was saying it was a week ago, and I think the hardest thing my reunion started out very slowly, and it really was difficult, and everybody just kept saying, give it time, and that didn't help me at all in the beginning, because I really couldn't deal with that. That wasn't helping me right then and there at all. So I just wanted to say that.
What did help?
How
did you get through?
I guess when people talk to me about different things and about handling what was happening at that time, that was better. But I found just thinking about, maybe next month it'll be different, maybe next year it'll be different. It was just too hard.
Let's talk about that then. What are some things? How do you get through those difficult months?
Jack
I met him here. He's here. He's in the conference. He was up in the hospitality suite.
Well, because you really don't know if time is going to make it better or if time isn't going to change anything.
Well, I was lucky in my case. I found Joyce Pavo, who is in Boston, and I think she gave a workshop here at the conference, and talking to her really helped. So that's something, talk to other people and,
Well, and in talking, to find people who really are listening. Yeah, I think, because our intent is always to try to make that person feel better, to reach for that piece that's going to give them comfort, like with time it's going to be okay, really, and that's not what you're ready to hear. What you need to be is heard, and that pain needs to be put on the table and everybody to accept your pain and to love you for it and to say, okay, we're here with you and we'll process that pain with you.
Jen?
Well, I think for mine, my initial contact was like yours. It was nothing and has been for 3 years now. But I also think that after you, and I felt prepared for that because during the 3 years I read everything I could find. I went to a support group. I heard everybody else, but everybody else had been accepted except for one person in our group. All the reunions were good. All the ones I read about were good. The only negative I got was from people I worked with or people that I talked to that didn't know anything about adoption. But then after the initial contact and no response, and the second try and no response, and the third try and no response, all within a month, it was kind of a reassess what else you can do, what else is a positive that can come from it. And in my case, the contact wasn't positive with her, but had been with another family member. And so that's what I've had to rely on for the last 3 years, for my information, for my support, from the family side of it anyway. And it's kind of like, what else can I do that's going to be positive to get me through the rest of this if she never comes around?
Yeah.
I searched for my birth father, even though I was raised by my birth mother. And initial contact was total rejection. It was, who told you I was your father? And it's probably somebody else, and why don't you bother this person or that other person? And what got me through that is that I looked at why. I looked at, is this a rejection of me or is something else happening? And what else was happening was objections from his immediate family, wife, daughters. And I didn't know that at the time, but you have to look at, in your case, your mother, what else is happening? Is it friction from her parents? Friction from her husband? Her children don't know? Fear? Is it that she had a relationship with someone that she'd rather not have people know about? And perhaps she may fear that you look like this person, and you coming into the picture would blow her cover, let's say. There are a lot of reasons which have nothing to do with you. And that is what I found was the situation. It took 20 years to resolve. My dad signed paternity affidavit last year. His family still objects. I'm still not welcome. But he was able to overcome that. That's a big thing to overcome. And as far as whether search is worth it, I think there's something very demoralizing on the father end of the spectrum to not know who your father is, or to believe or be led to believe that you could be any one of a number of people's offspring is quite humiliating. And to have a DNA test has been done, by the way, which has proven paternity. And for me, it's a peace that I know who I am, that I know what my heritage is, what my ancestry is, and I just had to hang in there and realize that other things are going on besides this person's feelings toward me directly in the situation.
I was going to bring up another point. I have met some of the other families. They didn't know that much about my mother, and they obviously didn't know about me, but they just took me right in and were wonderful. Now, that is really great, but still that's that feeling of my mother. And if she would have just said to me in any kind of human terms, I'm sorry, I'm married, I have children, no one knows about you, I hope your life is okay, but I can't have a relationship, I would have felt sorrow, but I could have gotten through it a lot easier than I'm not interested and don't ever call me again. You know, that's like not
Second
even
rejection.
So I imagine it's just total denial. She just would prefer to not remember this. But I too had read books, but I mean, my intellect told me one thing, my heart told me something.
You experienced that rejection again. And
It's
the pain is real.
devastating. That rejection is devastating.
I'm a birth mother, and I just wanted to say, I remember when I first heard of adoptee searching in the 70s, I was terrified. I mean, there was some TV movie, I think, is how I first heard of it, and I was terrified. I remember just like my heart pounding and turning red and just like freaking out. Now, at the time, my child was 4 years old or something, you know, and I thought she was going to knock on the door tomorrow, and I was horrified, you know, I was like, you can't do this. All the things that people say, birth mothers say, I'm supposed to have privacy and all this. That's the way I felt when I was, in my early 20s. And now, of course, I feel completely differently. And given how old your mother must be, it just seems to me that one of the things that I think is true is that it takes a while to get used to that idea, that a change happens, and part of it is just to even consider the possibility is what makes it possible to change your feelings about it. But I know that, as a birth mother, I didn't always feel that way. I didn't always feel that open.
Dealing with differing processes.
I think you're also dealing with a different generation. My mother was 72 when I found her, and her first impulse was no. But my father's family accepted me, and it was through their talking to her and saying that they had met me and, oh, you must meet her, and on. And finally, it took about a year, and this was 13 years ago. And it's, I hate to say patience, but very often patience and time takes care of that situation. She must get time to think about it and work it through herself.
I was just wondering, I mean, nobody really talks about birth fathers very much, and I have found my sister, I found my mother, and now the next step is I'm going to look for my birth father. And I feel really unprepared. Nobody's talking about them. I mean, how do they feel 35 years later? Do they feel a sense of terrible shame that they didn't marry this woman that became pregnant? Do they secretly have the same biological kind of primitive feelings that women do? Like, this is your flesh and blood. Of course, on some level they want to find you, and they want to see you. Or, I really would like to know, how do men emotionally feel about this?
I'm married to a birth father. He didn't give up a child 35 years ago, but I have a support group. We have several birth fathers in that, and I work with the network of birth fathers. And one of the things that their rights were never dealt with prior to 1973. So they didn't have to sign off. They were nothing. And so their loss, in their words, sometimes is worse than the birth mothers, because they got nothing, absolutely nothing.
They didn't get to make the choice.
I found my birth father, and when I went into this whole process of, after 34 years, discovering that all this crap about adoption was boiling up inside of me, I was real clear that finding my birth father was as important, if not more important, than finding my birth mother. Maybe that's because I'm a male adoptee. Most people I've talked to have been female adoptees. But the couple of other male adoptees I've talked to have felt kind of similar to that. And yeah, birth fathers tend to get left out a lot. My birth father never knew I existed, and was surprised when I told him who I was. But he reached out to me just like a family member. And although he himself tends to be a little conservative and is not real, doesn't show his emotions much, he said a few words which were very clear. And he said, "You're welcome in my family, and I love you. You're my son." And regrets having not known, and wishes that somebody would have told him that I was around. And I've been hearing a few other people talk about their birth fathers and having positive response. And not everyone, like every situation is like that.
Well, it seems like if they knew, there would be a different reaction versus if they didn't know about the pregnancy. And what about, I mean, does someone have experience with
I think these people were saying that, right, there's a missing of rights just like there were for birth mothers, for birth fathers, because they were taken out of the picture as well.
The birth father that we have in our group that has a child of 24 that he's been reunited with, he said that he was 17 and the girl was 17. He wanted to marry her. Her parents said okay, but his parents said no. And back then, you had to be 21 to get married for a male. And so he was done with it. I mean, the relationship with the girlfriend was severed, a relationship that that they both wanted to continue and weren't allowed to, plus the loss of his child.
Do they think about these children
Yes.
the way the mothers do?
He kept,
They know
after
they
the child was born, he kept somewhat of a relationship with the mother, not an intimate relationship, but, they would converse whenever they'd get back into their hometown together. But he wanted to find her. But the birth fathers that I come in contact with have searched and found. I don't know how those feel that don't know anything about that.
I actually found my birth father first. I just figured it would be simpler since his name wouldn't have changed through marriage. It was also geographically a lot more simple for me. And I got a wonderful response. I am so much like him, it's unbelievable. And I'm a little disappointed. I sort of wanted to look like my mother, but he's been beating himself up for 34 years over this. He actually married my mother, but at that point she didn't want to have a relationship with him, so they eventually got divorced. So I am actually not a bastard, just for public communication.
But you're an outcast then, the rest of us
And I think it's been probably an incredibly significant, as significant an event in his life as putting me up for adoption was my contacting him. I think it's been so healing for him to know that I cared enough to find him. And he thought about it, he saw the TV shows, the articles, but I don't think he ever felt he had a right to do it. And he always thought about doing it, but never got around to it. And he loves me. I have no doubt of that. And I love him too. You know, I think he seems to have suffered more than, no, I can't say that, that's not fair. I think my birth mother has resolved a lot more of the issues than he has. But it's been wonderful, and he cared. He always cared. He never forgot me. He never had any other children. And it's just been wonderful. He's been so accepting. His fourth wife is also. Yeah, right. Yeah. She's been wonderful too. It's on both sides. It's been equally wonderful.
On birth father, even though my father died, he was 28 and my mother was 30 when I was born. But I did find out he never married, and he died at the age of 37 or 39. And we were trying to figure out, did he know that my mother died and somehow felt responsible for it, or what? In what way was he affected by that too? And the other thing, which is a little bit off the topic, but it's dealing with a birth father. My husband was in medical school, and in being there, they were all approached for artificial insemination. And I said, now getting into this, I said to my husband, I said, well, how come you didn't do that? You know, we keep on hearing all these stories about this now. And he said, well, I really didn't think I had a right to have a child living someplace in this world. I didn't think that was morally right. And so, more people should be advised about that.
I had searched for my birth mother 13 years ago. There were no support groups, and I did it kind of on my own. And I wasn't interested in the birth father. I got a name, and he was in the military, and that's all we knew, and I knew that was going to be a brick wall, and I really didn't pursue it. And I was angry because he had denied paternity, and because he had a good military record, they let it drop. I didn't see the correlation, but now I'm starting to think differently, though, and I'm starting to pursue him because I think, why did I not have hatred for her? And I said she was a product of the 40s, and I could understand her point of view and some of the things I had been through. Yet I couldn't understand his point of view, and he was a product of the times where it's okay to make the locker room jokes and you scored, but when it came time for paternity, it was acceptable for you to deny it, and you were patted on the back and everything was fine. So I hope if I can find it with the military thing, it's going to be tough. But I'm glad I waited because my attitude has definitely changed.
If I can.
I'd like to comment. I'm a birth mother, reunited with my son, Ed, here, and his father doesn't know. At the time I was pregnant, I couldn't tell anybody, so I didn't tell his father, and so we've talked about it in the past, but it is difficult, I think, with us because he doesn't know, but I think it takes some time, really, to, when the father doesn't know, because Pat had asked that question, but I think that in time, we will do it. We'll have it.
You know, it's funny because I've thought about it a lot, but I've rarely heard anybody say it until I said it over there, and it haunts me tremendously to think that I have no father, and that I don't know who he is, and that my chances of finding out who he is are very slim. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't know him. And for some reason, that bothers me more than my birth mother. And my birth mother I've been reunited with, and it was a tremendous amount of rejection at first, and it was a long, drawn-out battle, but now we have somewhat of a relationship, and it's a relatively decent relationship. But I feel that even though I have found her, I'm still very disjointed, I don't know, something.
Still a piece missing.
There's there's a piece missing, but it's even different than that. It's just like, I have no father. Like, he doesn't exist, he never will exist, and how could she have had me, because I have a mother, I mean, it doesn't work that way. It's a real bizarre feeling.
It's like that saying in society, everyone knows who their mother is, but nobody's sure who your father is. It's like some kind of a thing that you know this person gave birth to you. But when it comes to fathers, it's more vague than that. Is this person? And you have this fear that you're searching for the wrong guy. But if you find this person, you say, no, it wasn't me, it was my roommate, you know.
Well, I'd like to share something about my birth father. You know, even though they were married, and they were married, you know, more than 20 years when I came back, close to it. My birth father had a very different reaction to all of this over the years. You know, my birth mother, you know, let's search, let's find her, let's hire a private detective, let's go, let's do this. And every year on my birthday and all of those things. But my birth father was the one who said, no, we can't do that, don't be ridiculous, you know, we're not allowed. You know, he was on that end of it. And when I came back, I think, you know, I was just sitting here, you know, listening to all of you and thinking, well, how do I feel? What is my issue with him now? I think it's simply that he is not as upset about this as I am. And we've gone through a lot. I mean, he has said the horrible things to me. He has said, well, you were an insignificant event in my life. He has said that. He also, but on the other end of it all, so the whole past, his whole role in this, you're talking about how, well, maybe, you know, how he felt about his role in this. I think I can't even describe, to say that it bothers him tremendously that he didn't marry my night. He left a message on our answering machine, and I could hear him eating in the background. You know, Karen, okay, so you can't make it to, you know, the Memorial Day picnic, you know, and he was like that. So I just thought, you know, this he's in the present. He's having this present relationship with me that he really likes, that started to him in 1984, and that's really good, and I'm really happy about that. It's anything before 1984 that, you know, he doesn't want to address.
Yeah, I'm a birth mother and reunited with my son, and this conference has raised my consciousness around some of the issues of birth fathers. My son's father wanted to marry me, and I guess due to some inner reluctance of my own in addition to my family's abhorrence of him, that became no. But what I had forgotten and what he reminded me at the point at which we all were reunited was that he had offered his grandparents to raise our son. And I had forgotten that. I mean, it's an incredible thing when I think of it. And I think how little in touch I was or concerned with his feelings. And not because I was indifferent, but because there was no space to be anything but concerned for this child and my relationship with him. But it occurs to me now that this is really a time for healing for us around those issues.
Just if I can kind of speak to this issue too, I'm in the process of trying to find an agent for a book that I'm trying to write with a friend of mine who was birth fathered, on birth fathers. And we've done several interviews at this point, and of course we're getting the men who are like the birth mothers here, who are interested and concerned about their children and who have these feelings. Some have never married, never had other children, much like the birth mother's experience here. Some of the men are that way. They are very concerned. They have never forgotten that child. Others, and we haven't interviewed many of these folks yet, but others say, you know, insignificant event, it was no big deal, did the best thing. I'm sure they're there too. But I think very little has been done in terms of identifying. And I wish John Ryan were here at the conference, because he's the chairman of the National Birth Father Organization. But like a conference like this, that draws birth fathers that are concerned about finding or maintaining contact with their birth children, with their adopted away children.
If I can interrupt, I'm here on John's behalf.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, I'll meet you after the surrogate John.
Contact me too. I have a couple of birth fathers that are very concerned about their children that have been found, and they've been
Appreciate that.
reunited with. In fact, one adoptee initially wasn't interested in finding her birth father, had no intention at all of making contact with that fellow who must be a jerk. But we had to find him first in order to find her birth mother, and he was just so warm and so concerned. He was so pleased to be found that she eventually, very soon afterward, talked to him, and now she's living with him. I moved out to Massachusetts. But anyway, also I wanted to say that I am a birth mother who's been reunited with my daughter, and her birth father was a foreign student from Iran. And I lied to him, told him that I wasn't pregnant when he was planning all these great things, for us to get married. And told him I didn't want to see him again. And we just kicked him out, so to speak. I mean, out of my life. And in 1983, 20 years later, I was reading Cub Communicators and Quarterly Arms, whatever the magazine was, and it suddenly hit me that the birth father could have had feelings. It never dawned on me. I never allowed myself to consider that he might have had some other feelings, and I just went through a horrible grief of whipping myself for not having considered his feelings at the time. And then, 6 months later, after I found my daughter and we were reunited, I found out through the adoptive father that the agency had contacted him after I signed the relinquishment. And they told him that he has a daughter, and he said, I want my daughter. I'll take her back to Iran. My family is quite wealthy, won't have any problem. And they said, no, you can't have her. You have no rights. He left the country that spring, and never, to my knowledge, has come back. And when I think of his cultural focus of the father being in total control of the family, and children being so important to the father, you know, it's just, it really gives me a lot to feel sorry for. I know it was self-protection on my part. I did what all I had to do at the time. And she's grateful, my daughter's grateful that she didn't end up in Iran, and so am I. But he had feelings. And I recognize that now, and now we can find it. Though I have not really tried that international search.
You know, I think we're earlier talking around an issue that I would like to throw out to everyone to discuss. One of the things, the title of the workshop Was the Search Worth It? And what I hear us talking about is the reunion process and the post-reunion process, and whether or not that's good seems to make it worth it, or at least that's what I'm beginning to hear. I'm wondering about just internally for people, whether the reunion turned out good, whether the search process turned out good or bad. How was it successful for you as a person, as in your own growth, or was it? What made this worth doing for you in terms of your growth?
Mine wasn't, we didn't have a reunion. My mother kept in contact for a while, but now it's just dropped it. But I still think it was totally worthwhile, especially 5 years ago I had 2 surgeries. And I finally had somebody to go to, say is their medical history. It wasn't this, sorry, because when I started, what really kicked me off on the whole thing was my son spent a week in the hospital. We never could diagnose what it was. And we said, we don't have any information. My ex-husband also was adopted, so we were really out in the cold. So I still think it was worth it. It's helped me just know who I am. I explained in one group, I grew up in a small town as a Catholic, and people always said I looked Italian. until I came down to Chicago and they said, oh, you look Jewish. And my father is Milton Goldstein, so it solved a lot of issues in that aspect. And it's gotten me involved in this whole situation and growing in the support group and really staying in the group, which is the issue we brought up before too. How do you get people to stay, support the other people that are coming in and share, even if it's a bad story, so you don't all go around thinking it's glory and marvelous. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't the good stuff either. It wasn't the lady on the hill who was welcoming to her mansion and the fantasy died. But there is a lot of growth, and I still think it was well worth it. And the knowledge, knowing, is so important.
Jump in, please.
I probably had one of the worst outcomes you can imagine. I searched for my daughter and found that she was dead. Suicide at the age of 17. And it's a little hard to talk about. It was only a few months ago that I found this out. But I feel quite convinced that searching was a good thing for me to do. And I'm glad that I did it, even, you know, given the fact that it's very difficult to deal with what I had to find out. And I think the reason is that I know for myself as a person, as long as I was sort of in the closet being a birth mother, it didn't matter if I was a successful artist, it didn't matter if I had a long-term stable relationship with a husband and, you know, with people. Always, for me at least, there was a sense that if people really knew about me, then they would have different opinions or somehow it would be different. And so there was a way in which nothing that I accomplished in my life mattered because always there was this sense that if people really knew. And so for me, the search was also intrinsically connected in my mind with bringing that into my everyday experience and into other people's everyday experience of me. And so search was worth it because it was important for me to be a whole person, not to have those compartments. The other thing is that I feel very strongly that, I mean, I don't feel guilty about surrendering my child the way I think some birth mothers do. I mean, I feel that in any kind of meaningful sense of the word, I didn't have a choice, a particular choice, and not because my story was unusual, precisely because it was very usual that, you know, young women, unmarried women didn't have a meaningful choice in those days. And despite that, I also coming to understand that it was hurtful for adoptees to feel abandoned or to feel rejected. And I think the way any parent of an adult child has to be, whether you relinquish the child for adoption or not, there comes a point, I think, in your life when you need to be able to look at your child and say, I did the best I could at the time, and I'm sorry if it hurt you. And, I mean, I do know at this point, and I've done everything I could. The hardest thing for me is that I didn't have a chance to say that to her. But for myself, I know I did everything I could.
I think that for me, I was in the midst of what you were talking about, just not quite 30 yet, and I was just starting to really feel like I was on my own, although I had been married and had a family for some time. Had moved away from the adoptive family, so I started to be able to get away from some of the loyalty issues a little bit. And as Kate said in the last session I was in that she was talking about, I did the first really selfish thing for myself as an adoptee because I was the good adoptee. And I never hurt anybody, never did anything, never asked a lot of questions. So that was a real, it was a real turning point for me because I really started growing again. I had been some time since I was out of school, didn't finish college, didn't know what I wanted to do as a, you know, for the future type thing. And so it's been a real turnaround point for me as far as back into finding a self and a future and starting off on a little bit different foot, taking hold and, you know, getting in charge. So even though the outcome was negative, or a great part of it, the search was definitely worth it.
Yeah, I think it's being able to give up the role of victim for me. That's really important.
accept the shame and to take charge and say, hey, I can move from this spot, and although this spot may be not great, I can take responsibility for it, but not guilty, that sounds so great. You know, I'm not always
Sure.
But at least act as if that were true. To proceed as if I did have some control over my destiny. And at the point at which I was meeting my son for the first time, a friend of mine had taught me how to make grape ivy wreaths, and I went to the woods and pulled down grape ivy and made a wreath, and for me that has always symbolized the whole meaning of search, was that completion of the circle, you know. I naively thought that that was it. Many grape ivy wreaths to go, but it was just wonderful.
I think when we deal with the truth, if you're real honest with it, you grow from that, even if it's painful, you really will grow. I have 3 children. At work, I was married to an Iranian. And I would go into the doctor's office, and there was nothing around. They don't keep much history on illness or anything else. And now I have, on the other side of the family, some history. So my children are like, well, whenever I get really surprised, they're quite aware of my situation, and they're teenagers, so they're going through this with me. But I still feel, even though it's painful, I would rather know the truth. That is so important, that it's painful, but it is the truth, and it's not. I mean, I thought I would go on trips to my adopted family, and I never felt really close. I felt like I was left out because I didn't belong anywhere. And we would go to Canada, and I would always be walking down the street thinking, one of these people from, you know, my parent or cousin, they were in Canada, they were in Wisconsin all these years. So, you know, it was really strange, but I was always in Canada thinking they were walking all over the place. So now at least I know where they're walking, and I know, you know, where they are, and the people that I have connected to are good. I do have a relationship with them, so, I mean, with all kinds of things you do get pain, but you can grow from pain to pain.
I think getting rid of the fantasies is like a big plus, because that's what my search did for me. It just helped me face myself, and like I really thought like I had it all together. I was like, gee, I don't have a lot of fantasies. And then when I found out the truth, like it was like, oh my God, I really did. And I just like to share with you a poem I wrote. The reason I wrote this poem was I'm in a support group, and I kind of felt like I was the only one who had this problem. Like everyone else was having these great reunions, and I do the newsletter for the group. So I put in this anonymous poem. And the funny thing was that even people that I thought were having really good reunions came out about their problems, and I was like, so I didn't feel so alone. It's called My Dream, My Reality. To dream is to plan vaguely and be unduly hopeful. So states the dictionary, but it wasn't a dream to me. Or was it? I felt the bond. It was like a magnet that kept tugging me along. It was the foundation of my search. I thought that if I could feel this bond for someone that I didn't even know, then surely everything would work out fine. I never planned vaguely. I thought I prepared myself for any outcome, whether it be perfect or horrid. I was in control, cool, calm, and collected. That was me. Finally, the bond led me straight to you, and meeting you was the happiest day of my life. And then suddenly, I learned the meaning of reality, fact, truth, actual existence. Due to circumstances that you could or could not control, you had to give me up again. It all happened so fast, I felt as if a rug had been pulled out from under me. The fact is that you do actually exist, and the truth is I wasn't prepared, and I'm not cool, calm, and collected. I did dream and hope, and maybe it was unduly, but I did do what I set out to do. I found the missing piece. I found you. The pain will remain in some degree always, but knowing is truly better than never knowing. I'll always hope that things will change, but in the meantime, I'll try and learn to deal with reality. You are a part of my dream, now you are a part of my reality, but you will always be a part of me. And that's why I think it was worth it, because it just made me realize, like, this is it, and this is what happened, and it just kind of took away all the great fantasies and everything, and just helped me feel more at peace.
One of the things that I found, talking about fantasies, but I never knew this about myself, and I think it's a common adaptation. I had this like splitting. There was the good mother, the bad mother, You know, it was like the mother I never knew, the one no one ever talked about. That was the reality, but it was mainly inside my mind. And it wasn't until just, I mean, a few weeks ago, I got divorced, and I remained very good friends with my ex-husband. And it hit me one day that he's like the good husband, the bad husband. It's like I don't want to let go of him, because it's been a common pattern for me to have the mother you have, but the one you'll never know. It's kind of like, you know, so I'll collect husbands just in case I need one. And it was really cute. He said, "You mean like I'm Team B, waiting to come back into your life?" And I said, "Yeah." And I realized, my God, this has had such a primary force in shaping the very way I carry out basic intimate relationships. It really blew me away when I saw that for the first time. It was like incredible.
I'm a birth mother who searched and found 3 years ago. What I found was probably my worst fear. I have a son who's dysfunctional, possibly more dysfunctional to me than to some other people. And other people say you should be happy for this or that. I have, you know, a hard time with it because I have 2 other sons who are absolutely perfect. Anyway, but basically, I would search again if I knew what I was going to find at the end. I think in this past year, the way I can explain it is when I was in the mirror, the first time in 26 years, I loved the person I see.
I found out that I was adopted when I was 30, and I was 50 before I searched. And I felt I really had a double, I'm so glad that I did, because not only did I find for myself, but when I started the search, I kept thinking, if I had given up a child, I wondered how I could live with this, not knowing what had happened to this child. And by doing this, I gave my mother something, because when I met her, she had all these years, I still get, she said, I prayed for this moment for every day for 50 years. And so we both had a completeness there.
Well, earlier you said there, even within the adoption movement, there aren't words to express the feelings. I have a few words to express my feeling of relief after completion of the search. I realized I was no longer carrying around a burden of about 100 pounds on my shoulders. It was gone. It's just gone. It's like I didn't know it was there, but I'm relieved it's gone.
I think I've heard a number of people talking about shame, and it sounds like that's what you're talking about. I think Pat alluded to that in the lady over here. If I could just, my experience, my father is still very much in shame about me in a sense, because I represent a part of his past that he wanted to close the door on. And when he was married to my mother for a short time, he apparently did a lot of different odd jobs, and he wasn't holding one job for very long. He was driving a truck across the country, buses, whatever he could do to make some money. The fact that my grandfather, my mother's father, split up their marriage because my father, I guess he liked marriage because he was married, and then his wife left, and he didn't get a divorce, and he married my mother. My grandfather found out and had the marriage annulled and brought my mother back to Minnesota. But when I found him, he had returned to school and was now a Methodist minister. And he had made a rather dramatic change in his life. And I came back at a time when he had another wife, and he had two children who were my half-siblings. And the part about what if I don't want to be found was the fact that he was living a very different life. He had closed the door on that part of his life and didn't want to be reminded about that period of his life. He was scared that his wife would be very upset. I've known my father for, I think it's at least 9 years now, and the two half-siblings on that side still don't know of my existence. He has not told them. And I think that's the burden that you were talking about. And I know he's carrying a lot of shame about his past. And I think the that searching or being found can really begin to relieve some of that, but he's not at a point where he can do that.
He's still carrying the scarlet letter. Remember that it wasn't Esther who was suffering
That's right.
the adultery, it was the minister. More so.
That's a good point.
Message been a good tool.
I believe you're right.
I'm going to send him a copy of that book. I forgot about that.
Yeah, anonymous copy of
Yes. Get some AAC notes. That I just have to get.
I think sometimes there are losses that we don't expect. I mean, one was that I didn't realize how attached I've become to my fantasies. I didn't know that the reality, whatever it was, even wonderful, let's say, was still not my fantasy, and that would be painful. And giving that up meant, I think someone said something about knowing you had a future or going on or planning. Well, I had my fantasy that I would have this island, and I didn't need to plan a future. And so that was a loss, losing that. They live in Rhode Island, but they don't own it, you know? So, you know, I didn't get my island. I had to get my life together. When I, you know, found them, that's when I went into social work. I mean, all that stuff happened. And I think it's true that we lack words, I do, to express this. But when I try to think back, well, what was it like when I was in junior high or high school? Who was I? How did I feel? You know, when I looked at myself, and what I can say is different is when I'm walking down the street and I look into a window, a store window, and I see myself, I can describe myself now. And I don't mean, you know, physically, which is important, but I mean, I have a frame of reference. I can say, I can explain myself to my fiance. When I do such and such, oh, that's just like my grandmother Lynn. Or, oh God, I'm just like my mother, I wonder if I'm going to be like her when I'm her age. I can explain myself to myself and to others. And even many of those things, maybe you're gathering this, is like not too positive, but I know, but it's me. And I'm surrounded by other people who share those same, you know, horrible characteristics. So, you know, it helps.
I wrote a poem to my father after we had a DNA blood test and paternity was established to express what I felt about knowing who I was and his part in that, and I kind of sketched it here, so I'll read it. It's to my father. It says, thank you for quieting the doubts that haunted me, for restoring my pride and dignity. Thank you for giving me my family heritage, for filling in the branches of my family tree. Thank you for giving me life and for giving me your name. Thank you for taking off my blindfold and allowing me to see that in your reflection what I can become is an endless possibility. But much more than all of this, thank you for loving me.
I've got a question. You mentioned that your father hasn't told his children about you. Yesterday I had to do some serious soul searching on that issue because I protect my mother and don't intrude in the good adoptive situation. She has 2 children and I'm trying to decide, since she doesn't want to really have a relationship, do I say to heck with you and now try for the siblings? Where do you? Okay. I was going to ask you for a professional answer.
You got it. People have been on my butt, so to speak, to get going on locating my half siblings, and I am going to do that. There's real debate.
There's risk.
There's real risk. Part of it is I may risk losing a relationship with my birth father. We had it out in a sense last summer when I wrote him a letter saying I'm giving you a year to tell them, and after that, at some point, I'm going to find them, and I will have a contact with them. And I think it's better coming from you than from me. But I'll give you that year of grace, because I was working in school and I thought I'd be finished in a year, but it's now dragging out longer, so he's got a little more time. He doesn't know that. But at some point, I'm going to do it. And he wrote back and essentially was very threatened. He was very angry with me, scared. I mean, that's the major word that came back. And the risk is that I may lose a relationship with him.
Is that a suggestion you would have, though, to give them that time, or just ignore them? Since she's ignoring me, just ignore her and go on, or give her that option?
You know, I'm just...
I contacted her 13 years ago, and the last time I really heard from her, so I called her in November, and I got 2 words on the phone. There wasn't rejection, there just was nothing. But I think when I got into support group and kind of start pushing support and finally in letters referring to adoption, and not that my mother had gone to school with her mother and facing some reality, then it really went dead. And so it's been maybe 4 years, 3-4 years of really nothing.
The only thing I have to say about it is what Alan says he did. I think that no one should ever do that without letting the parent know that that's your intention and giving them time. I don't think that you should do that, spring it on and just go do it without warning. I think in all fairness you should say, I will be doing this and I'm going to give you X number of time to tell them yourself, and if you don't after that time yourself, I will be making
feel better.
In fairness, in fairness.
I think you can't risk losing what you don't have either.
Yeah, I thought
And
of
that
that.
sometimes when you find those siblings, that may be the cementing factor
And that might be
that will
too
help
hard
to bring you in relationship.
Okay.
When I say something, I feel a little bit like a voyeur in this meeting, and I first want to thank you for letting me sit in and sharing all this. And it is having, as always, great impact on me, and I'm going to use your experience, I hope, productively with the people that I talk with now who are adopting and beginning searches. But what occurs to me in that situation is what I have heard and you have heard so many times from adoptive persons who are waiting to search until their adoptive parents give them permission, or until they die.
Well, yeah, that's the thing.
It's the
Do I
same.
need her permission?
No, it's the same. It sounds to me as an outsider like the same issue. You're an adult. You don't need permission. These are your siblings. You're entitled to them.
But where do my rights intrude on her rights, and where do my
Where do your rights
responsibilities?
intrude on your adoptive parents' rights or anybody
I'm
else?
not adopted.
No, you're not.
You know, that's the thing that I mentioned earlier that I want to come back to. I think we all, at some point, need to really begin to say, we can shake up the universe a little bit. There is some responsibility that I believe, total bias here, folks, okay? Label it for that. I really believe that birth parents have a responsibility that goes beyond relinquishment or letting a child go for adoption. And I think that extends into the birth family as well.
I'd like to tell you what my brothers, what their response was. Because coming back, I thought this for years, for a couple of years, not just when I first came back for, in the reunion, but then years later, I still thought, oh, I know they're angry, I know they're upset that I've come back and interfered in their lives and all of that, even though I had no signs. But you know what they're angry about? They are angry. They're angry that they didn't know about me. And they've said that to me.
Like I said, yesterday morning I argued one way, and by 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, somebody had said something that my thinking started going the other way.
Let me ask you a question that may help you, or maybe for me I'm asking this. If there are people in here that have searched and found reunion, has that destroyed your relationship with your adoptive family, which you thought it was going to do?
Absolutely not.
Has it? Has it?
Gotten much
My
better.
experience was better.
Much better.
So what are you waiting?
Thank you. That's validation.
There were several hands that shot up on that comment. Yours was first, I think.
But we're so willing to put aside our own needs. It's amazing.
And that's an issue we were talking about earlier too, and I'd like to come back to just for a moment, that this search is a process of our own growth, and I think we are willing at some point to become stronger or more empowered. And I think that's a phase that we go through. We do need to look at our own needs and say, this is my right.
I was thinking the burden you described is on your father's shoulders, or was it something that
Right, yeah, I'm kind of carrying it for him in a sense, yeah.
You see, your father and your siblings are both going to grow.
But I'd like to play the devil's advocate. I have 6 brothers, half-brothers and sisters that don't know about me. And I just don't feel like a push. My mother is 85, going to be 86 years old. And she is petrified that they will find out. And I just, as much as I would like to meet them, particularly the brothers, because I grew up with 4 sisters, I really can't, I just really can't push that.
Well, they're all gonna be dead pretty soon. You know, you better start
But that was my argument yesterday morning.
You know, how much can, she's gone through a terrible loss too all these years, and I just don't.
This side of the room would like to respond.
I just have a question
I have a
for
question for you
you.
later.
Did somebody first want to respond to?
Yeah,
Okay,
I would
Richard.
just like to say, I think
Can't hear you.
fear is our biggest enemy. And for 23 years, I was in the closet, and my biggest fear was that these friends who thought I was something, who liked me for who they knew, were going to reject me. And the first person I told, my best friend and neighbor for many years, and I broke into tears, and she hugged me and she said, "Why are you crying? No, I don't think it worsens you." I think maybe contacting your siblings is going to take a big weight off your father's shoulder. Maybe deep down, that's what he wants, is for you to do this rather than
We're talking different generations.
I'm your generation. I've got some notes for you. Go ahead, Bert, please.
How do you feel about it? Like, I have a full brother, and my mom says, if you ever come back to see me, you're just a friend. Okay, I never told him but a lot of people in this office, encourage me to go for it, man, And I always have a dilemma. Well, if I go for it, am I gonna break up the whole birth? We were talking about adoptive parents, but now I'm talking about the birth parents.
Yeah.
How is that? How is my mom gonna feel if I walk in this kid's life and say, "Hi, I'm your sister," and and what? And but how?
Yeah, but
you have waited 9 years. Is that what you said? 9 years, and are you in contact with them?
They don't know about me.
They don't know. Well,
No.
how do you feel about it? Didn't you all this time think, well, geez, they're half part of me. I have
Absolutely.
a right to know. Aren't you mad? Like, don't
Oh,
you
yeah.
want to kind of like
Let me respond to that, because my dad was sort of dangling this out in front of me all the time. He was always planning on telling them.
Sure.
But what I think happens is that my 2 siblings flip-flop having crises because it's never the right time. One of them is always in some sort of turmoil. And finally it dawned on me after 7 years that this is going to go on. So that's when I got angry with him last summer and wrote him and told him. And so yeah, I was angry. Yeah. And in answer to your question. Well, he was, and it took me 7 years to figure it out. What I can answer you, hopefully briefly, is I'm biased in favor of the truth. And I would go down there and I would tell my half-brother and half-sister that I am their brother. And if that damages the relationship with my father, it does.
Are you going to do that?
Tomorrow.
I think there's a plane to New Orleans. We're close to O'Hare, I know.
Some people have been getting on his butt for a while.
See what you started, Ken?
I'd like to respond to what she said a moment. I did what your mother is proposing that you do for my father. I was allowed to come there 20 years ago, as long as I didn't tell anybody who I was. I was the neighbor from up the street. I was all these other people. I say no, don't do it. It didn't work. It was demoralizing to me. It was insulting. It hurt my feelings. It confused a lot of other people. Some people knew better. It just doesn't work. And we have fought all this time against secrecy and all this junk and garbage, facts being altered and all that. Why would we want to take that from our birth parents?
Yeah, I have a similar problem too. I'm interested in a little feedback, but you'll tell me what I don't want to do. So. But anyway.
That's why you're asking us.
Because I'm getting tense already. That's right there.
But you
already.
want us to tell you, ask.
I guess I want you to tell me. I don't know what I'll do. Okay.
Be ready for a show of hands on this one.
Show of hands, right. I've got 7 half-siblings. I'm 58 years old. These half-siblings are all older than I am. The oldest one's 78. She's dead for that matter. Then we go down to 76. A bunch of senior citizens, essentially.
Careful.
Well, I'm getting close to that myself. And I met the brother. I finally talked to one sister, and none of them have told anybody. They have not told their spouses. They have not told their children. If I call this brother on the phone, which I rarely do because I'm the other woman, I just have to say, well, tell him Mary Jo called. But I can't say who she is. You know, my nephew, literally my nephew answered the phone one time. And I said, hi, is this Doug? And he said, yeah. Well, I couldn't say who I was, and I couldn't even explain why I knew his name. This one sister that talks to me now, she said, well, now, if I suddenly change the subject, that's because I can't even remember his name. That's a lot. That's because what's his name just walked in the room, her husband. So she suddenly changes the subject when she's talking to me on the phone, which she didn't even do for 3 years. It's because he just walked into the room. So I have all these in-laws, I guess you'd call them in-laws, or half-in-laws, I don't know what they are. None of them know I'm out here. And they will not tell. They will not tell any of it. They have adult children. You know, I don't know. This has been going on for about 7 years.
And what would you like to know? What are we
I don't
voting
know.
on?
What are we going to vote on?
Contact.
Well, there's one sister that nobody in the family talks to. I don't know why. I requested to talk to her down and talk to her. Some kind of a big family thing that happened so long ago, I don't even know whether they're mad at each other anymore. I'm sure you know how those things go.
But call her, she'll love it.
We're talking about people that are, I'm 58 and the closest one to me is 64. These people are all older than 64.
I just want to make one comment about that, and I think B.J. Lipton talks about the adoption game. And as long as we allow people to pull us into their game, and keep protecting them, this is going to continue. Somebody's got to put a stop to it. And like Ellen said, honesty, here it is, risk, do it, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, but don't you think timing is really important? Like, I contacted my birth mother about a year ago, and at first she said, I just can't tell my kids, Dora and Glenn, about you. I mean, it's a horrid story. She was put in a mental hospital after having her second illegitimate child. She stayed there for 9 years. She's not crazy. She never was. But, you know, yet now, a year later, I got a letter that said, you know, originally she wrote a secret letter in case she died. She wanted them to know about me and to contact me, but she still didn't want to deal with that period in her life with them. And now I get a letter that says, you know, I'm starting to think maybe I could tell Dora and Glenn about you. And if I had forced that, I just feel like it's so lovely. It's coming from her in her own time.
This lady, her siblings may not have that time. I will shut up, but one strategic suggestion. You know, I'm
already dead.
I always look for allies. Who in that family structure is the person, and you have to ask this, is your question for yourself, is apt to be the person that's going to be the closest person to understanding what you're talking about. Then following the strategy that Al suggested, I would contact that person and say, the time is, I'm going to have to tell everybody in the family about this. How do you think we should go about doing it?
Right. I've only talked to 2 people in the family in 7 years.
Okay. Which one of the 2? I mean, I don't care how many.
Or the one that nobody talks to.
That's the one.
Go ahead, like that one, don't they? This is interesting.
Sounds to me like the 2 that you contacted, neither one of them want to take the responsibility for opening up that secret to the rest of them. Maybe you need to just go ahead and contact each one of them and bring them all together.
Yeah, and I think we have a responsibility to future generations. I mean, you probably have nieces and nephews.
Sure.
I mean, my brothers and I know that we are the ones who will be left eventually, and that our relationship matters.
But the hardest thing that Dennis ever had to do was to sit down with our kids and tell them that they had a brother. And I thought he was going to faint before he ever got to it. He said, Stacy and Jeff, your mom and I need to talk to you. And I told him that I would be there with him, but that he needed to tell them. And you could just see him. He was white, and he was clammy, and I thought, God, he's like 38, and he's got a heart attack. And he waited the night before it was coming out in the newspaper, so I mean, he was pushed. And they were 16 and 12. And after it was all done, and he was really, his voice was shaking, and the kids were sitting there with big eyes. And Stacy says, "Is that all? I thought you were going to tell me you were getting a divorce." And then they just jumped right in. How can we help? And they had a whole bunch of questions, and the issue had been taken care of immediately. And they wanted to know everything else. Anticipation is always worse than it happening.
I just keep thinking of this 85-year-old mother. That it seems to me you have the potential to really give her a great gift at the end of her life. And that
I love the way she looked at it.
well, I mean, I don't have any answers in terms of your strategy or how to do it, but my sense is it has the potential to give her the best thing that ever happened in her 85 years. And I suggest that you explore that.
The question I would raise is which will be better, that you and your siblings gather at her death or the funeral, or before she dies, and give her an opportunity to join the family and have you join
I'd like to say something from the birth mother's perspective, because I dealt with this issue very recently. I have a 25-year-old daughter I raised, and I never told her that she had autism. And actually, that was my greatest fear, and the greatest obstacle to my search was the fear that the daughter that I raised would find out, that she would hate me, that she would fear that I would give her away, and I could not stand the rejection that I felt would be forthcoming from her if I told her at any point in her life. And it wasn't until this past spring that I told her, and her reaction was actually extremely positive and extremely compassionate. But I carried that burden with me for 25 years, the fear that she would find out, would be not just personally injured, but that our relationship would disintegrate if she knew. Now, that may have all been in my mind, but it was a very powerful feeling, and it's not an easy feeling to get over. I mean, it takes tremendous...
This marks the end of Session 37, Tape 1. Now turn, please, to Session 37, Tape 2.
Whether or not you should contact brothers and sisters, whether you have the right to do it. I run a search and support group, okay? I always stand up somewhere in the meetings and say this: you can sit here and we can debate this issue from now until next year, and you're going to get as many different opinions and reasons why you should and shouldn't do it. But I stand up and say, listen to your researchers, listen to what we have to say, what has happened here, what has happened there, apply it. If your gut instinct says don't do it now, then there's no point in doing it. You will know instinctively when it is time to open up and tell your daughter, you know, to go to your father and write the letter. Why did you wait 8 years or 9 years? But I think we have to remember one thing. We're talking about meeting adults. That's a totally different ballgame. When you're dealing with a minor, brothers and sisters, okay, that's something totally different. You know, Jackie's situation, because we know she has a younger brother, but he's still a minor. You know, does she have the right as an adult to go to a minor child? And that's an issue Jackie has to deal with, okay, and no matter what our opinion is. But I always say, do what you think. We sit here, and in the 3 years, I was like this lady who said in 1969 my daughter was born. I lived in the closet for years. And my husband used to cut the articles out of the paper. I used to get the paper with little holes in it so I wouldn't see, because because I said, you promised confidentiality. When it was time for me to open up my mouth, it was time. I don't know what triggered it. I just walked out. Why do we all have to sit here and need validation from Ken because he is an expert in the area, or you because you're an expert? I mean, why are we all sitting here and saying, okay, out of 36 people, 30 say, go for it. And you walk out of here and you're all ready and you do it, but instinctively you feel wrong. Then what do you do?
I see this as part of a process, and I think the people that show up at AAC conferences are in some phase of a process of coming to that point of making a decision to search, deciding when the time is right. And I think what this is about today is exactly what you're saying. It's giving individuals a chance to say, you know, is this the right time for me? is my process happening now? Do I need to go contact my half-siblings right now? Or can I put that aside for a little while?
But we have a tendency, some of us, I'm as guilty as everyone else, okay? Some of us get caught up in the moment. And some of us have more powerful personalities than the person you're speaking with. And you can easily direct them into a situation that they are not comfortable with. And they'll come back to you and say, but you told me it was okay to go ahead, and look what happened. You know, we all push Alan right now.
Right, but Alan's been pushed for 9 years. Here's
Okay,
someone
but
who...
he did, that's right. He's still sitting.
I'm not big, but I'm wired. I'm resistant for
But
it.
how would you feel? You catch you in a weak moment, and away you go, and all of a sudden you destroy the relationship with your father. When you knew instinctively, deep down underneath in your gut, I say go with what your gut says, because, I mean, at
Well, I
40,
think-
I'm suddenly realizing that, you know, I don't need validation anymore. My gut says don't do it. Let's not do it, because I've been in the hot water, I've been up to my eyeballs drowning, and I realize now that no matter what anyone tells me, go for it, do it. And I'm in a situation where I'm in a search, found my birth mother's family, but nobody will tell me where my mother is. Okay, everybody's holding secrets. And I played the little game. I finally got to the point where I realized I don't want to play anymore. I mean, it's over. For me, it's over. It's now a direct confrontation. You know, I know who's got the answers. You're going to give me the answer, or else I'm just going to sit here and be such a pain in the neck until you finally give it to me. For me, it's right. But no amount of talking from this lady telling me to do it and push me. I'll go with you. I'll drive you. I'll sit in the car. I'll sit in the living room. It's when you are ready. When you are ready, if you want to do it, you will do it.
And that's the only way that I think a search is empowering,
Yes.
is when we decide when it's time.
That's right.
And a word that's been used over and over again in this conference is that of responsibility. I think all of us need to say, I can get support here, I can look at options, maybe think of things that I'd never thought about, or see that maybe there's another way to look at this, but we all have to take individual responsibility and decide when it's right for us to make the move.
I also think we learn to tolerate a certain amount of discomfort. That if we all wait for it to be perfectly comfortable, and I guess everything would be resolved around the grave, you know. And it does take a certain amount of strength, and that's maybe what we gather here, is that yes, it's hard, it's painful, it's risky, it's all those awful things, but I have people who've said, go for it because you deserve it, and you pocket that scared piece of it, and that.
And the piece that's new for some people is that, oh yeah, I deserve this.
That's right.
That's the piece that's new. It may be just educational, and then they make a decision. But I wouldn't want anyone to come out of here saying the right thing to do for everybody is to search. And tomorrow, we're all going to start.
But you see, when people ask questions, they ask for different reasons. And I'm going to pick on you, because you said you were asking and you knew what we were going to say. What you were asking for was not an answer, but for some support.
I guess you're probably right. I picked out the person already.
And what's the phone number?
I don't know, I gotta find that out.
I think for me, what I see here is that I sit back, and I have the same thing with my siblings that I don't contact. I sit back here with all these reasons why I don't do it. And then I sit here and listen, and I say, wait a minute, there's some flaws in my reasons, and if I didn't hear that from people, I wouldn't be able to recognize, you know, what it is that I'm doing in my own thought processes. I mean, I listened and I heard some really good things that people were saying that were faults in my own reasoning that I wasn't going through with this thing.
A number of us have brought up the issue about being birth mothers, about worrying what our friends would really think of us if they know the truth. And something that happened to me that was very important in the last few months, I ended up having to tell a lot of people very quickly because, you know, it was just so tragic when I found out I wasn't able to function, and so I had to just, you know, say, well, you know, I had this child, and now the child is dead, and, you know. And in telling a neighborhood friend this, and talking to her about a week later, what she said to me, you know, and of course my thing I'm always thinking is, what will she think of me now that she knows the truth about me? And now that she knows that I'm a birth mother, what will she think about me? And what she said to me is, you know, I always thought that people who gave up children for adoption were unfit mothers. But knowing that you gave up a child, and knowing you, I know you never would have been an unfit mother, and so I'll always think about what adoption means differently now.
Yes.
And so I realized that the opposite was true, you know, that changes other people's perceptions about a whole institution and about for other people.
I think in listening to your gut feeling and knowing when the time is right is good if you're at peace with that. But if your gut feeling is caused by fear or some of these other things and you're in total chaos because you can't do it and you're not at peace with it, like Ken told me a year ago to find my brother, and I've not been at peace with it and I haven't done it, and it's just been a turmoil for the last year waiting for my birth mother, who I don't know where she is again now, to make that decision and to tell him. And so it's not a peaceful decision to wait.
No,
If it's a
what I-
peaceful decision,
Yeah,
that's
no,
different.
I recognize that, and what I was trying to say is, listen, educate, but don't let someone else direct your
Right,
action.
right,
And I
right.
think what we
Yeah.
all came out of in all of our searches, whether we're in the middle of it, at the end of it, or into the next, 2 and 3 and 4 stages up, is the fact that every little bit of piece of information that we have gotten, we've absorbed, it's put it in, and it's given us the strength. It's shown, me that there is something more to me. I'm now, every little piece of information I now get fits in. I'm getting stronger. I got enough information now to tackle this one issue. I have 150,000 other issues that have to be tackled. But right now, I'm doing what you're doing. It's taken some time. I had to get more information. I fought this battle, and and I listened. And I think that's it. It's when you do feel ready, and that's what I mean. All of a sudden, you're going to know. It's just going to be there, and away we go.
I think it was Pat that first brought up the issue of feeling that the search made her feel less of a victim. And I think we're all victims of the system. And I wouldn't want anyone leaving this room feeling that they were a victim of a group pressure to do
Right.
something. I want to get rid of the victimization. And that means individual responsibility. And when I heard you say that, it's like I can agree with you 100% on that. I don't want you to be a victim of this any more than I want you to be a victim of closed records and secrecy and distrust.
But it's been said in other sessions that we are the experts, and sometimes that's what we're coming here for. What experience have you had in guidance that we can get, and it's not tell me what to do. I mean, we were joking about it, and maybe there is some of that, but it is what has happened.
To change the subject just slightly, I'd like to affirm that even a totally unsuccessful search is worth it. Even if you don't find the people, the search process, the growth from support groups, and hearing other people's point of view, your growth in the process, it's still worth it, with no results.
I think that may be the definitive answer to the question that we're addressing today. And if there are maybe a couple of comments in closing from anyone?
Yeah, it seems to me that search forces us to grow, that being birth mothers and adoptees, that our growth has been stunted. And by forcing ourselves or taking the steps to search, that we do go ahead and grow, and that there are a lot of people who don't want us to grow, and it's healthy to grow.